The election of a pope, known as a papal conclave, is one of the most sacred and secretive processes in the Catholic Church. However, throughout history, these elections have occasionally been marred by intrigue, scandal, political maneuvering, and even violence. From external interference to internal factionalism, the road to the papacy has not always been smooth. Below, we count down the top 10 most controversial papal elections, exploring the drama, power struggles, and historical consequences that made them infamous. 10. The Conclave of 1492, the rise of Alexander VI. The election of Rodrigo Borgia as Pope Alexander VI in 1492 is often cited as one of the most scandalous in history due to allegations of bribery and corruption. The Renaissance-era papacy was no stranger to political intrigue, but Alexander's election pushed boundaries. Borgia, a wealthy and ambitious Spaniard, reportedly used his vast resources to secure votes, with rumors of lavish gifts, promises of lucrative positions, and even direct payments to cardinals. While the extent of the bribery is debated, contemporary accounts, such as those by the chronicler Stefano Infasura, paint a picture of a conclave swayed by greed. The controversy didn't end with the election. Alexander VI's papacy was marked by nepotism, scandalous personal conduct, including fathering several children, and political machinations that deepened the Church's reputation for corruption. His election highlighted the influence of wealth and secular power in the Renaissance Church, sparking calls for reform that would eventually culminate in the Protestant Reformation. 9. The Conclave of 1378. The Great Schism begins. The Conclave of 1378, which elected Urban VI, was a pivotal moment in church history as it triggered the Western Schism, a 40-year period during which multiple claimants vied for the papacy. The election took place in Rome under intense pressure from a Roman mob, which demanded an Italian pope after decades of French-dominated papacies based in Avignon. The cardinals, fearing for their lives, chose Bartolomeo Prignano, the Archbishop of Bari, who took the name Urban VI. However, Urban's erratic and authoritarian behavior alienated many cardinals who soon declared his election invalid, claiming they had acted under duress. They elected a rival pope, Clement VII, who established a competing papacy in Avignon. The resulting schism divided Europe, with nations aligning behind different popes based on political allegiances. The 1378 conclave's controversy lies not only in its chaotic circumstances, but also in its catastrophic consequences for church unity. 8. The Conclave of 1159, a double election. The election of 1159 was a dramatic showdown between two factions of cardinals, resulting in a rare double election. The majority of cardinals chose Roland Bandinelli, who became Pope Alexander III, while a smaller pro-imperial faction backed Ottaviano de Monticelli, who took the name Victor IV. The dispute stemmed from tensions between the papacy and the Holy Roman Emperor Frederick Barbarossa, who supported Victor IV to assert imperial influence over the Church. The conclave itself was marred by physical confrontations, with reports of armed supporters disrupting proceedings. Alexander III eventually prevailed, but only after years of conflict, excommunications, and diplomatic maneuvering. This election underscored the growing tension between secular and ecclesiastical power, as well as the vulnerability of the conclave process to external interference. 7. The Conclave of 1823, the Veto Controversy. The Conclave of 1823, which elected Annibale della Genga as Pope Leo XIII, was controversial due to the use of the jus exclusivae, a veto power exercised by Catholic monarchs to block undesirable candidates. In this case, the Austrian Empire, through Cardinal Giuseppe Albani, vetoed the candidacy of Antonio Gabriele Severoli, a leading contender, on behalf of Emperor Francis I. The veto was delivered informally, but effectively derailed Severoli's chances, leading to Leo XII's election. The use of the veto sparked outrage among cardinals, who saw it as an infringement on the Church's autonomy. While the jus exclusivae had been used before, its application in 1823 was particularly contentious because it highlighted the extent of secular influence over the papacy. The controversy contributed to growing calls to abolish the veto, which was eventually phased out in the early 20th century. 6. The Conclave of 1534, the Medici Pope. The election of Alessandro de' Medici as Pope Clement VII in 1534 was controversial not for the conclave itself, but for the circumstances surrounding it. The Medici family, known for their wealth and political influence in Florence, had long sought to secure the papacy. Alessandro, a cardinal with a reputation for cunning, was elected with the support of Emperor Charles V, whose troops had recently sacked Rome in 1527, weakening the papacy's position. Critics accused the conclave of being swayed by Medici money and imperial pressure, and Clement VII's subsequent papacy did little to dispel these concerns. His reign was marked by political missteps, including his failure to prevent England's break with Rome under Henry VIII. The 1534 election remains controversial for its entanglement with secular power and the perception that the papacy was becoming a prize for Europe's elite families. 5. The Conclave of 1130, another schism. The Conclave of 1130 was a chaotic affair that resulted in another schism with two popes, Innocent II and Anacletus II, claiming the throne of St. Peter. The election was marred by factionalism among the cardinals, who were divided between Roman aristocratic families and reformist factions. A rushed vote by a small group of cardinals elected Gregorio Papareschi as Innocent II, but a larger group, backed by the powerful Pierleone family, chose Pietro Pierleone as Anacletus II. The ensuing conflict saw both popes excommunicating each other and seeking support from European rulers. Innocent II eventually prevailed, thanks to the backing of Saint Bernard of Clairvaux and the Holy Roman Emperor. But the schism exposed deep divisions within the Church and the vulnerability of the conclave to external influences. The 1130 election is remembered as a low point in papal legitimacy. 4. The Conclave of 1799 to 1800, the Venetian Conclave. The Conclave of 1799 to 1800, which elected Barnaba Chiaramonti as Pope Pius VII, was extraordinary for its location and circumstances. Held in Venice rather than Rome, due to the French occupation of the Papal States during the Napoleonic Wars, the conclave took place in the monastery of San Giorgio under Austrian protection. The unusual setting, combined with the political turmoil of the era, made the election highly controversial. The cardinals faced pressure from both the Austrian Empire and the French Republic, each seeking a pope favorable to their interests. The conclave dragged on for 3 months, with debates over candidates reflecting the broader geopolitical struggle. Pius VII's election was seen as a compromise, but the conclave's dependence on Austrian hospitality and its displacement from Rome raised questions about the Church's independence. This election highlighted the papacy's precarious position in an era of revolutionary upheaval. 3. The Conclave of 1903, the last veto. The Conclave of 1903, which elected Giuseppe Sarto as Pope Pius X, marked the final use of the jus exclusivae and was steeped in controversy as a result. The leading candidate, Mariano Rampolla, was vetoed by the Austrian Emperor Franz Joseph, who sent Cardinal Jan Puzinha de Kosielsko to deliver the veto on grounds that Rampolla was too pro-French. The veto outraged many cardinals who viewed it as an anachronistic intrusion into church affairs. Although the conclave proceeded to elect Pius X, the incident prompted significant backlash. Pius X himself condemned the veto and issued a decree commissum nobis banning its future use under penalty of excommunication. The 1903 conclave is remembered as a turning point in the Church's assertion of autonomy from secular powers, but the veto's lingering influence left a stain on the election. 2. The Conclave of 1045, the layman pope. The election of Giovanni Gratian as Pope Gregory VI in 1045 is one of the most bizarre and controversial in history, as it involved the unprecedented election of a layman to the papacy. Gratian, a wealthy Roman, allegedly purchased the papacy from his godson, Pope Benedict IX, who had grown tired of the office. This transaction, known as simony, was a grave sin in the eyes of the Church and sparked widespread condemnation. The conclave, if it can be called that, was less a formal election than a negotiated handover, with Gratian assuming the papacy to restore order after Benedict IX's scandalous reign. However, Gregory VI's papacy was short-lived, as he was deposed by Emperor Henry III at the Synod of Sutri in 1046 for his role in the simoniacal transaction. The 1045 election remains a stark example of the Church's vulnerability to corruption and external interference during the chaotic 11th century. Finally, number 1, the Cadaver Synod and the Conclave of 897, the posthumous trial. The most controversial papal election in history is arguably the Conclave of 897, which followed the infamous Cadaver Synod and elected Pope Theodore II. The context of this election is unparalleled in its macabre drama. In 897, Pope Stephen VI, driven by political vendettas, exhumed the corpse of his predecessor, Pope Formosus, and put it on trial for alleged crimes. The decomposing body was propped up in papal vestments, convicted, and thrown into the Tiber River. The Cadaver Synod outraged the Roman populace and destabilized the papacy, leading to Stephen VI's deposition and death. The conclave that followed, which elected Theodore II, was conducted in an atmosphere of chaos, with rival factions vying for control and the Roman mob exerting pressure. Theodore II's brief papacy attempted to restore order by nullifying the Cadaver Synod and reburying Formosus, but the election itself was tainted by the grotesque events that preceded it. The 897 conclave stands as the pinnacle of papal controversy, a surreal episode that encapsulates the volatility of the early medieval church. Conclusion: the history of papal elections is a tapestry of faith, power, and human imperfection. While the conclave process has evolved into a more structured and insulated institution, its past is littered with moments of scandal and strife. From bribery and vetoes to schisms and posthumous trials, these 10 controversial elections reveal the challenges of maintaining spiritual authority in a world of political intrigue. They also underscore the resilience of the papacy, which has endured centuries of turmoil to remain a central institution in global Christianity.